have not forgotten about Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traore has been doing significant things there. They kicked France out. He said he does not want the West in his country. He formed an alliance called the AES, which also includes Mali. I know I'm forgetting one in there as well. But he has stand firm on this, that he does not want the West intervening at all. And two things just happened recently that I think is giving the West pause. Here's the first one, something I would love to see happen in this country. Burkina Faso just banned political parties. It's the latest of several measures that rights groups say are shrinking the civic space of the Sahel nation. Now, what you have to understand, again, when they're talking about rights groups, you have to look into some of these organizations. A lot of them are puppets of the West, and they support, obviously, these countries following the path of the West, of the US, of France. Like France was all up in there, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, stealing their resources, etc. But let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen. That is him. That is Captain Ibrahim Traore. He has been, they love him. They love him there. And this is another one that I say keep an eye on. The West may try to find a way to take him out. He has had over 20 assassination attempts on his life. He's one of the leaders that they see as a significant threat because, again, he does not want the West there. He does not want the imperialism. They want to be self-sufficient, similar to Libya and Gaddafi. So they are banning political parties. After several years of suspension, political parties in Burkina Faso have formally been dissolved by the military government, which has also seized all their assets in a move analysts say is a major blow for democracy in the West African nation. So why is it a blow to democracy to abolish political parties? Because, like, when you look back at history, you will see that the founding fathers of this country did not agree with political parties. And the reason why they did not support political parties is because that they feared that people would side with their party over policy or over issues. And that's exactly what we have in this country. You have candidates that are part of different parties that may feel differently about certain issues. But when that legislation comes to the floor for a vote, they follow party leadership. We've seen this before with the squad. So, Roger Meadows, friend of the show, woke me up to this idea a year ago. He said, why do we need to have political parties? Why? I think it's a way to keep us more divided, right? If you think about that. In a decree issued on Thursday, the government led by Captain Ibrahim Traore scrapped all laws which established and regulated political parties, accusing them of failing to comply with the guidelines. Listen to the way Al Jazeera describes this. Troubled. The troubled West African nation is struggling with violence from armed groups linked to ISIL, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda. It is one of the growing number of West and Central African nations to have undergone coups in recent years. And as we've said before on the show, as we've dived into this, right? A lot of times these groups, these fragments that are still left over of ISIS, they're just created by the West. They're created by the CIA. They're created by these intel groups to go into these countries that want to be self-sufficient and to disrupt and cause chaos. Why? So then the West can come in and say, we have to come in and save the people, protect the women and the children, which doesn't really work that much anymore since they backed a whole damn genocide. But they'll use that logic and then they come in and they overthrow the leader. And they've been trying to get rid of him for quite some time. Traore seized power in September 2022, 8 months after an earlier military coup had already overthrown the democratically elected president, Roch-Marc Kabore. Despite strong criticism by rights groups and opposition politicians of his authoritarian approach, 37-year-old Traore has successfully built up an online cult-like following among Pan-Africanists, with many likening him to the late Burkinabe revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara. You know, it's interesting that they say it's an online cult following when you can actually see videos on YouTube of people in Burkina Faso being very happy with what he is doing and that he is there. They're building their own roads. They're developing, they're improving their infrastructure without the West. France is pissed because they can't come into Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali and steal like their resources anymore. Imagine being in a country that is rich with resources, but you're not getting it because Western countries come in and they steal it. And then everybody looks at you and they say everybody there is poor. Think about that for a second. Traore's anti-colonial, anti-imperial pronouncements are often shown in high definition AI generated videos that have gained him widespread admiration across the internet. But the decision to ban political parties does not sit well for democracy. See this? It's all about democracy, right? And then a lot of times they say that when some of the Western countries say that, oh, this country is not practicing democracy, it really a lot of times means that this country is not allowing the West to come in and do what they want to do. I thought you should see this from Al Jazeera because Al Jazeera doesn't always get it right either. They can be a hit or miss. Remember, they're also in Qatar, so you know how they can bend on certain things. That was the first announcement. Here's the second announcement. And I know the West is fuming over this one. 3 West African juntas have turned to Russia. Oh boy. Now the US wants to engage them. So here we go again. The US has declared a stark policy shift towards 3 West African countries which are battling Islamist insurgents and whose military governments have broken defense ties with France and turned towards Russia. So does everybody see what's happening now? So the AES, which is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they formed this alliance called the AES. They're anti-imperialists. They don't want you there. Okay. And honestly, I think they have every right to do that. I don't think the West should be in these countries and taking over people and killing people, killing their leaders. We ain't got time for none of that. We don't need to be there. We got problems right here in the United States. That's why our country is falling apart. So they formed this alliance called the AES, and they're working together as a unit. Now, Jeffrey Sachs said something really recently, and I think this is an interesting point. He said that all the countries in Africa need to band together as one to fight imperialism and to keep the West out. So the West has its eye on the AES because something like this can easily spread. And the moment that it spreads to other African countries, then the US will see it as a threat. Oh no, they're trying to be on their own. Oh dear God, how dare they? We got to stop that. Similar things to what you see right now with BRICS, with other countries that have joined BRICS. They decided to create a multipolar coalition among each other. They also are tired of being under the thumb of the West, and they want to do their own thing. And I believe they have every right to do that. So now Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, apparently, according to this, have turned towards Russia. And see, the West can't have that. The West can't have that. The State Department announced that Nick Checker, head of the Bureau of African Affairs, would visit Mali's capital, Bamako, to convey the U.S. respect for Mali's sovereignty. So here we go. And chart a new course in relations, moving past policy missteps. It adds that the U.S. looks forward to cooperating with Mali's allies, neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, on shared security and economic interests. So do you see what the U.S. government is already trying to do? We understand that you want to be secure. We understand you want to have a growing, thriving economy. Let's work together. As this is not worked out well. It's worked out terribly for other countries in Africa as well and across the world when you look at the global south as well. And that's because they are looking towards Russia. Vladimir Putin say whatever you feel about him, for whatever reason, it seems as though he has been able to communicate to African countries in such a way that makes them feel like they can work with him and not be stomped on. And there's a difference. So again, this multipolar world that BRICS is wanting and trying to establish, more and more people, more and more countries, when they see the wickedness of the West, when they see how the West continuously back the genocide of the Palestinian people, when they see that the West continuously overthrows leaders in other countries, bombs other countries, they are turning away from the West and they are willing to work with other countries. Let's go on a little bit more here. Absent from the agenda is the longstanding American concern for democracy and human rights. Imagine talking about human rights now. The Biden administration had halted military cooperation after coups deposed the elected civilian presidents of all three countries between 2020 and 2023, with Niger's Mohamed Bazoum still locked up in his own residence. The U.S. statement makes explicit a radical change in policy that had become increasingly evident over the 12 months since Donald Trump returned to the White House. So it's just really interesting to me that our government can sit here and call out human rights issues, which a lot of times what you'll see, these things aren't even real. They are orchestrated and created by the CIA, by the West. We call them the color revolutions, where they create this unrest in these countries to make it seem like the people are really upset when usually that's not the case. But how are you going to call out human rights issues that you believe another country is doing when you sat up there for years and backed a whole damn genocide? How are you? It's laughable at this point. The US government has no leg to stand on when it comes to human rights. And everybody sees it now. But what you are seeing is that Burkina Faso is finding a way to do what is best for their people. And whether we agree with that or not is really not the concern. It's none of our business. We have no right to tell them what to do with their people in their country. They make those decisions. And I look back and I think about it. You know, I get kind of envious sometimes when I see other countries building roads that actually withstand. When I see other countries trying to end homelessness in their country, giving housing to everybody in their country. And then I drive over a bridge that has a hole in it right here in the United States. I get a little jealous, not going to lie. Because the reality is, if we didn't put, not us personally, but if our government didn't put so much of their money, of the money into defense, into these wars, into nonsense, if our government didn't work as hard to cover and protect Wall Street and the bankers, we could have that life. You look at the infrastructure in China, we are way behind, way behind. You look at the homelessness rates across the world. We are up there with the highest ones. Now, we're supposed to be this wealthy, great nation. Why is there so many homeless people here? Why are so many people getting evicted? Why do we have bridges with holes in them? Why do we have bridges falling apart and collapsing? Why do we have infrastructure that is constantly falling apart? Why do we have public schools that don't have all the resources that they need? Because America decided a long time ago that it wanted to be this imperial power and it wanted to be the best and the strongest. And any other country that was going to be some type of competition, the US government decided they were going to take down. That's how we got here. But empires don't last forever. Rome is the best example. And we are now at a point where the United States empire is falling down. There was a book we read when I was in school, like back in the day. My teacher used to read it to us. It was called Wayside High is Falling Down. The United States of America is falling down. And all of these little band-aids that Trump or Biden or anyone else tried to use to just put over the wound, the band-aids are falling off and the wound is still present because they never tried to heal the wound. And I also think it's interesting that when we had so much manufacturing here in the United States and people were able to have a decent job working at a factory and they made so much money, or maybe not a lot of money, but they made enough money to get by, to get a house, to take care of their family. They didn't have to go to college to get a degree just to be able to have a family. The fact that we had so much manufacturing in this country at one point in time, and people got greedy and said, let's actually have these parts made overseas because it's cheaper. That's not the fault of China. That's not the fault of Russia. That's not the fault of anyone else. Those decisions were made right here. And that's why these cities like Detroit, that's why they fell apart. Cleveland, all the Rust Belt, all those cities, that's why they fell apart. Once the jobs left, those cities started to collapse because someone decided to be greedy. So we've had plenty of time, our government had plenty of time to rebuild sustainable infrastructure and to make American workers get back to that place again. And every time they try to find a shortcut, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's overloading some workers and laying off others to cut costs and cut money. And that's why we got here. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.